Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today. We are starting a new series called Inner Harmony, where we'll discuss how we can embrace the wisdom of ancient literature to cultivate mental well-being and conscious living. It's a 6-part series. Today is the first series where we'll be talking about Introduction to Vedic Wisdom. With our speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have 22 members on Zoom and around 25 on our Facebook. Welcome, Vaish. Very happy to be starting a new series with you on Success Sadhana.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, JM. Great to see you and great to be with everybody today. You mentioned literature, and I looked it up really quick. It said C letter at the bottom of the etymology. Character representing one or more of the sounds used in speech and so forth. And I really took to that when you said that, because so much of the wisdom of the world is available in writing. Unfortunately, it's just a matter of sorting it all out, right? So we're going to talk about that today. Carl Sagan once in a video had walked down an aisle of a library, and he said, if you read 3 books a month, this is how many you could read in your lifetime. And he walked for quite some time, and he came to the end of it, and then he looked at the camera and said, but it's not how many books you read, it's which books you read that make the difference. So there's literature and there's literature, and we're going to talk about the differences between them today. So welcome everybody. Good to see you all. I'm looking in, I see a lot of you joining right now, and some of you are at the ocean, and some of you are working, and some of you are smiling. I can see you. Thank you very much. So today, really, we'll talk about knowledge, because the word Veda, which you see in the opening slide today, means knowledge. And as humans, we like knowledge. We're open to learning and improving. It's one of the exciting aspects of being a human. And also the idea of inner harmony that you mentioned from the title, JM, I found that helpful too, because there's nothing worse than cognitive dissonance, is there? You all knew what I'm talking about? There's a sense that I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. Or there are 2 conflicting ideas, or more than 2. Nowadays, there can be many, like hundreds of them, thousands of them going on in my mind all at the same time. And it creates quite a cacophony of sounds within our head that give us this sense of discord. So the ancient teachers really emphasize that we have to get clear ourselves inwardly, and the word harmony, as in harmonious, is quite the opposite of discord, or discord, the idea of being discordant. And so that's what's the project is, to have some inner harmony. JM, why are you smiling so big today? What's your secret?
I made a mistake. So while sending links, I see several of them. I think I misplaced some links. So many incarnation or repetition of my names I saw in my chat box. I was just smiling on that. So a lesson learned. I'll fix that next time. Okay.
I'm not quite sure what you're talking about when it comes to mistakes. Welcome to my world. So let's just start off, speaking of inner harmony, with harmonizing with our own thoughts. And we'll take just a moment to do some introspection, sometimes also called meditation. Meditation has the root word medi, which also forms medicine. And it really means, means to take appropriate measures. Interestingly, one of the appropriate measures we can take is to look at ourselves, look inwardly. I'm so used to looking outwardly, thinking for the future. But what about what I am right now? After all, I'm not a human doing, I'm a human being, right? To be, what does that mean? That's interesting that we can actually contemplate the fact that I am something. And I don't have to become anything else. And if I can feel that for a moment, then there's a sense of inner harmony that I exist. That's good enough. I don't have to add anything on. Like that creek, remember, JM? We made much about that. I visited it again last week up in Northern California. There's a place that my wife and I retreat to sometimes. It's the Botanical Gardens at Fort Bragg, California. And there's a beautiful stream that runs through it, fresh water. And there's a bridge, a charming bridge, something you'd see in a story tale. And then on the bridge, there's a placard that says, "No coins necessary to operate creek," as people apparently throw a lot of coins in there thinking that it'll bring them good luck. And in a kind of humorous way, they say, not necessary. So for ourselves, what we are, the consciousness streaming through our body, we can stand on a bridge and look down and just appreciate that we exist. You don't have to throw anything into it. You don't have to add anything else to your life. You already are something that's so amazing that it'll keep you amazed for the rest of your life if you just take a look at it. And now, are you smiling? Did you fix the problem? Or
No, I
did
just
it amplify? Okay, I'm going to play you a meditative sound. We'll experience this, and then I'll walk you through a few points so we can introspect today. So you don't have to do anything. It's just follow my voice, okay? So first, let me try to give you a little tanpura in the key of C. Here.
it's it's very faint, like it's low volume, but we can hear it. Just wanted to request if you can switch the original voice, because
I'm
few of
back.
them, thanks. It looks like few of them couldn't hear.
I'm sorry?
It looks like few of them couldn't hear because they had an older version of Zoom.
Sorry, everybody. We're crossing over from one Zoom platform to the next. It gives a message when I switch it over saying that some people may not be able to hear it until they upgrade. All you have to do is go to Zoom and say, I want to upgrade. So let's go to a few slides, because today I'm starting a series of described as inner harmony, and I'm going to describe what are the Vedas today. And within the large genre or canon called the Vedas, there's also the book Bhagavad Gita, which is very popular. It's been read for thousands of years and preserved very carefully under the watchful eye of great scholars. Maybe go to the first slide. That is the introduction. Just like to see what we're talking about. Back to the beginning. So it's an introduction to Vedic wisdom and success sadhana. What is sadhana? Sadhana means that success isn't a mystery. It's a recipe. So if you get the right recipe and you get a little guidance how to use the recipe, then you can very likely reproduce what somebody has cooked, a very tasty meal, perhaps. And similarly in success, which means you're able to rise above the maelstrom of the inevitable problems of the world as a first step. There's also a recipe. So I'm not making anything up or shooting from the hip. I'm simply following the course as it's been passed down. The Vedas are rife with instructions that are a stair step up to a higher level of consciousness. So I'll describe that in brief today. It's a summary. Okay, onward and upward. First, I'll start with the idea of epistemology, because in any system of knowledge, when you walk into a physics class, you're going to be asked to accept a given here and there. And epistemology is an important base for any discipline, or any knowledge system, and the study or a theory of the nature and grounds of knowledge, especially with reference to its limits and validity. So there's a phrase called blind faith. So the Vedas don't ask us to be blindly faithful, but they also warn us not to go off the guardrails in the other direction and be blindly doubtful. There is a way in which there's a mystery of the universe, and there's a mystery to everything. Whatever we take up, we have to accept some knowledge source that we can trust. And at least in the beginning, when we're testing it out, we have to be able to suspend our disbelief in order to enter within it. Otherwise, we get what Aristotle called infinite regress. If you doubt everything, in fact, that there's a way in which a colleague of mine describes how, okay, prove that water boils at 200 degrees. And then you got a thermometer and put it in. And then the colleague says, well, wait a minute, prove that's a real thermometer. And then you get a thermometer testing kit, whatever that might be. And then they say, wait a minute, how do I know that's a real thermometer testing kit? And back and back and back you go. So Aristotle said in any system of knowledge, there has to be a point from which you don't retreat. You have to accept a given. For instance, in geometry, when you're solving a problem, there's a given, right? So how do we get knowledge? What do we accept as valid knowledge? The Vedic system means that we're getting knowledge that's passed down through a reliable channel that we can hear and we can test out for ourselves. And it also says you should value the doubting process. This is one of the main points made in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that is intelligence means we should also doubt. Now, doubting is meant to get us to a point where we can accept a valid source for receiving knowledge. So this is important. Otherwise, we get this sense of complete helplessness that there is no truth. It can lead to nihilism, an idea like nothing matters, everything's random. But everything's not random. That's why there's science. Science is an ology. You can name a few ologies if you wish in the chat box. I know everyone always says sociology first, but there's biology and all these ologies. And ology, it has the sense of logos. It comes from the Latin word. And logos means that there's some system in the universe. Otherwise, there's nothing to study. If everything's completely random, you can't look at anything. So there are patterns. Therefore, we can look at it. So now let's go back. Pharmacology. Okay, that's definitely a science you better pay attention to. There are counter indications in whatever you're taking. You could be in big trouble. Okay, let's go back. Epistemology. How do you know what you know is accurate? How do you know it's, and yet my point here is, and the point in the Vedas and where they start is, you have to be able to trust some valid source. So let's look at the next slide. So to know something, we must begin with a given. So the sense that something's already known. For instance, if you're given some axiomatic truth about physics, you can go out and test it. And in fact, somebody says in a textbook that this is the speed of light. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. But if somebody says, or your textbook says this is the speed of light, you can question that, or you can go out and try to test the speed of light, but I don't know how you do that exactly from your own home. Or you can accept that there are valid sources that have tested it previously, and that there's, in the scientific community, some integrity, and there's a way in which the knowledge has been presented so that you can use these axiomatic truths to make further progress in your research. So that which is known, some knowledge is self-revealing. For instance, when you wake up in the morning, you know you exist. You're aware that you exist. There is a sense that when the sun comes up, you know the sun's risen because you can see it for yourself. You see it directly. And we can also become aware of our own consciousness and know that we exist. And what's the last point there?
It comes from an infallible source.
Comes from an infallible source. Yeah. So this sense of infallibility in knowledge, if we have such a source that's being presented to us, and that's how we accept it, and if we're not quite to that level yet, then we can suspend disbelief and have a working system until and work with the sections that we already know that we've vetted ourselves and we're very sure of. For instance, if you live on a 3,000 acre farm, if you only need 3 acres, that's okay. Once you get familiar with it, you can start working and being productive on those 3 acres. Okay, that's a very brief mention of epistemology. How do you know you know? So the Vedas are books. They didn't used to be books, and very interesting history of the Vedas was that they're an oral tradition. Now, someone may say, well, how were they preserved? Better than in writing. And we took a seminar about this recently, and one of the experts, who was the head of the Department of Philosophy at Utah State University, mentioned that in the oral tradition, people had a system for memorizing the codes of the Vedas, which are meant to be as an instructional for the universe. You know how when you buy something from, oh boy, I hate to mention IKEA because I hate putting that stuff together, but any place anywhere you buy something from nowadays, you get a little instruction book in a few languages, right? Do you use it? Yes, no, sometimes. If it's obvious, maybe you just try it yourself. And if it's not, maybe you go back. If all else fails, they say, read the directions. So that's the idea of the Vedas, that the universe isn't blind, random, but it actually has an instructional that comes with it. So that's the idea behind the Vedas. We come out, it's like, who am I? Where am I? What do I do now? And what do I do about all these changes in the world and all the problems, the confusion and so forth? It's like, read the directions. So that's the idea. They're meant especially for humans because, and they have a meritorious effect on all living beings, because when humans live in harmony with their environment, then all living beings also are benefited. When we see that people live outside of the codes of the universe, then there's a reaction, right? Like environmental reactions. Anyone live in Phoenix right now or anywhere else that's off the chart hot? So that's the idea behind the Vedas. And I was speaking, and I interrupted myself, about the oral tradition. There's a way in which it was memorized by people when they were young. And there's a system for repeating the codes, which were in Sanskrit. And there were intonations, like little notches in the sentences, audible notches and intonations through which one could then keep track of the meter and make sure that everything was in place. And people would actually memorize them. You'll find people from that culture nowadays, the Vedas. There's people called Trivedi. If you've ever met an Indian person that was named Trivedi, that means somewhere in their history, somebody in their family memorized all three Vedas, which is a big accomplishment. At least it would be for nowadays, because we're really distracted by lots of other stuff. So why was that more effective than writing? Because a lot of people were not literate at that time. That time means thousands of years ago. And when people started writing things down, they used scribes, and oftentimes the scribes were not literate. They were just like human copy machines. They would be handed a scroll, and they would then try to copy it. I mean, not try, they'd actually copy it. And if they were in a big hurry, because they were getting paid by the hour, they could make mistakes. Have you ever made a mistake when you're writing? Well, they did too. So the literary tradition wasn't as accurate. However, as I will mention, I think I already mentioned, I will mention again, these writings have been looked after over many years through a succession of teachers who are like professors, who studied them very carefully, commentated upon them, and also were vigilant to make sure that the tradition was preserved and not corrupted by any changes done knowingly or unknowingly. Okay, let's go back to the slides. JM put the slides today, and they're so nice. So Veda means knowledge. That's the meaning of Veda. Veda means knowledge. So what is a simple definition of knowledge? And you may be surprised by the definition, and this definition that comes in the next slide. Oh, don't go to the next slide yet. Look at what this person is holding in his or her hands, and that is a handwritten version of part of the Vedas. And you may or may not know that's written on a leaf called a palm leaf. They used a stylus, a metal implement, and they would press it. Oh, it seems so well written, doesn't it? For having used a stylus, you can't even see exactly what you're writing until you put it in the sun, and then it makes that place that you press darker. What a painstaking process people took to write things down at that time, isn't it? It always amazes me. First person who came up with a high-speed printing press was named Gutenberg, several hundred years ago. So before that, things were written by hand. Okay, besides that, Veda means knowledge. Now, a drum roll, and we'll look at the next slide. What is the definition of knowledge? If you stop somebody on the street, let's say outside a baseball game, and say, what is the definition of knowledge? What do you think they'll tell you? You just try this as a random experiment. You can put it on your YouTube channel and get 1 million followers. Just stop people outside a baseball game and ask them, what is the definition of knowledge? What will they say? Give me a few samples in the chat box. Oh, Locked Fengshi said information. Okay. Hey, we got the speed of light too from a physicist on here. Okay.
Chaitanya Subhadra says facts, frames
Okay.
his historical lessons and know-how of things.
Know-how. Okay.
Reshma says to be aware of what we are doing.
That's good too.
Learnings from JM. Mukta says what you know. And SG says trust and wisdom. And awareness state. Mayank says knowledge that helped me achieve my desires positively. The state of fact or knowing.
Now, wait a minute. Are you sure you guys are coming out of a baseball game here? I'm not sure that's what the answers you're going to get. Okay. These are really good. And you can see that it's an intriguing question. At least I think it is. At least I could say your answers are intriguing. So we want to know, what is knowledge? So there's an essential definition of given in the next slide. And it comes from one of the books of the Vedas, books of knowledge that I'm going to discuss today, which is called the Bhagavad Gita, which is sort of an essentialization of the huge amount of information that comes from the Vedas. So let's see that slide, and somebody give us a drum roll somewhere. Here it comes. Veda means knowledge. Next slide. I hope it's the right slide. Says, knowledge means knowing the difference between matter and consciousness. This is a fundamental definition of knowledge given in the Bhagavad Gita, which is known for its brevity. It's known for giving succinct, usable information. As somebody said, knowledge is information. So is the information usable to you? Somebody else mentioned that, to solve your problems and to get to where you want to go and so forth. Well, this is pretty far along in the what's called the tree of the Vedas, this definition, because the Bhagavad Gita is one of the ways that all of these literatures, which have lots of components, I'll go into in just a minute, gives this definition. Okay, enough of my ranting about this definition. Let me read it. Knowledge means knowing the difference between matter and consciousness. So very briefly, in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a distinction made between lower energy and higher energy. And therein lies one of the keys to success in life as presented by the Bhagavad Gita, knowing your energies. So the lower energies, as you've heard, if you've listened to this program before many times, that is earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. That's a summarization of the gross and subtle material elements. And these are considered lower energies. They're inert, they don't have consciousness. Then there's a description of what's beyond that or above it. And that is the conscious being. For instance, we're all looking at one another here through this little medium somehow or other, and you can notice when somebody's looking at you, because you'll know that somebody's home there. Who is that? That's the conscious being. Who's conscious? When the conscious being, according to the Bhagavad Gita, leaves the body, then nobody's home anymore. And you're not going to get that $20 that they owe you, unless they put it in their will and say, you can ask them again and again, and they won't answer you because they're gone. So the conscious being is a different energy. It's a different category of energy called conscious energy. Now, we experimented just for a few seconds earlier about consciousness. You are consciousness. We are consciousness. We're the conscious being that illuminates the body. We're also so different from matter that we can observe matter. Matter can observe us back. So we have, our nature is a lot more amazing and powerful than we even know. And this is one of the points in the Bhagavad Gita, is to rise above this conception that you're material. You're not. You're not your material body, nor are you your mind. And this is a premise you'll find throughout the wisdom teachings of how to come to self-realization. In fact, the definition of self-realization is very parallel with that statement. You're not your body, you're the consciousness within the body. And the way it's put in the Bhagavad Gita is there's a field and the knower of the field. So this body is called the field, and the knower of the body is you. You know your body to some degree. There's only so much you can know about it, but you're aware that you're in a body and that your awareness can go anywhere within your body, and you can know how you feel and how your body's going. So that's the foundational aspect of knowledge, is knowing the difference between these two energies. It's utilitarian also, and we'll talk about that a little later, why it's so important to know the difference between these two. Actually, I'll just tell you now, because where attention goes, energy flows. Everyone should repeat that. I shouldn't tell you what to do. Everyone may repeat that if they feel like it. Where attention goes, energy flows. Now, if your attention goes to matter and becomes entangled and snared by matter, it becomes absorbed in matter, then you'll take on the qualities of matter. What's more, you won't feel complete because matter's clunkier, flabbier than we like it to be. We're the most subtle. Of all the elements within the body, we're the most subtle because we're subtler than even the mind, which is so subtle we can't even see it, but we know it's there and we know how powerful it is. So the Bhagavad Gita points out this point. Please speak English, Vaisheshika. It points out that wherever you place your attention, you're going to go there and you're going to take on the same quality as whatever you're meditating on. That's good to know. Don't you think? At least give me one thumbs up, somebody. All right, thanks. I got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, let's try the next slide. Hey, Teresa, Debbie, JM. Can't believe how happy I am now. I got all those thumbs up. So the Vedas are a tree. The Vedas are a tree. So what's the tree? The tree consists of a system of roots. It also has a trunk, it has branches, it has leaves. And okay, let's go outside the baseball stadium again and ask people when they come out, what's the ultimate purpose of a tree? You could put it in the chat box. What's the ultimate purpose of the tree? This will be on your SAT. If you want a full 1,600 points on your SAT.
Rajesh says give fruit. Pavni says to give life. Manu says provide shade. Mariam says to be tree. GM says oxygen, support life. SG, be useful to other people's mind. Provide shade. Sankari, to provide whatever it can give us to help our environment. Nagma says grow, to make all other living beings happy. Chaitanya, turn carbon dioxide into oxygen.
Well, I could say one thing after hearing all those. Trees are magnanimous, aren't they? Where would we be without trees? Trees are our friends. I'm going to write a little book called Trees Are Our Friends. So now the ultimate.
Debbie, sorry, I do want to say.
Oh, yeah.
Debbie does have a answer to a question. You'll get none of these answers outside of a baseball game.
You'll get maybe some surprised looks like, what are you doing here? Anyway, nowadays you just tell people it's a YouTube experiment. They won't mind. So according to the Vedic system and the Vedas as a tree, the ultimate purpose is to produce a fruit. So there is a way in which the tree, as it grows up, is thinking ahead, thinking, what am I going to do? I'm going to flower and I'm going to produce a fruit. And of course, within that fruit, there's nourishment, there's enjoyment, and it can expand because there's more seeds within the fruit. We all know how that works. So the Vedas, let's look at it again, are a big project. They encompass the whole world. So if they are provided, and that's our claim, as an instructional for the universe, they have different aspects to teach people because people are all on different levels. And some people just want to find out how to be in harmony with the world we live in. Other people come to a level where they're questioning, is there anything more than this? Did you ever ask that question? Anybody? Is there more than this? Or heard somebody ask the question? Okay, so these are technical names, so don't mind. But for a moment, starting at the top, Shruti, the codes for living happily in the material world. So there's a sense that there's a way to live in harmony with the universe. So what are the universal laws? One of the laws is that you grow by giving, and you have to give back. We're being provided for it every second. So there's a system called yajna, or giving back to the universe, so that we're not in arrears. We don't get a debt. That debt is called karma, and we become entangled in karma, and we get our just desserts because of performing activities that are out of harmony with the universe. So the Shrutis, they give us codes to explain how to live in harmony with the universal laws. Beyond those codes for just living in this world are the Upanishads. Very interesting name in Sanskrit. Upanishad means to sit up close. Now, what does that mean? It means when you start asking the question, isn't there anything more than just living in harmony with the quote unquote material world, the status quo? Isn't there something more than this? I sense it as a human being. Human beings do all kinds of things that are irrational. We try to go to the bottom of the ocean. We try to go into space as high as we can. I'm just saying that, I'm not saying it's a bad idea necessarily. I'm just saying from a very pragmatic point of view, it's slightly irrational. We spend millions of dollars looking everywhere. Why do we do that? Because we have a little chip inside us that says, find out who you are. Find out where you come from. Don't we have that? Everyone wants to know. It's like, what's my origin? Now there's 23andMe. Like on a material level, we want to know, like, what does my ancestry look like and so forth? We have that sense. And that's why the Upanishads are there, to answer that question. Question means quest. Quest means a search for who you are. So the Upanishads mean, now I'm going to sit up close to somebody who's going to tell me who I am. And what you are is more important than everything else in this world. And I described that a little earlier. You're not your body. You're a spiritual being within the body. So then other parts of the tree, as a tree comes out of its trunk phase and it starts to put branches and leaves, then there's these other explanations of the Vedas which flesh it out, and it goes into these things called the Puranas, the Itihasas. Itihasa is just a Sanskrit name for histories. Puranas, also ancient histories. And they go through, as we know, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. There are histories and there are stories that guide us to knowledge. And then within that, within those, there's the very famous Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita, as I said earlier, is an essentialization of all the points in the Vedas. And it solves all our problems, just as the Vedas show us how to live happily in this world. And it also then, through the Upanishads, reveals who we are, and that what we are is more important than everything else in the world. And another way of saying what we are is more important than what we have. And then these Puranas, these histories, they start guiding us to knowledge through telling stories, like a friend would tell us a story. So the Bhagavad Gita essentializes all of that, and it solves our problems. Okay, then beyond that is the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is said to be the fruit of the tree of the Vedas. And beyond just solving our problems, it says, here's how to be truly happy. So that's an overview of the Vedas as a tree. And it's, as I said, a huge project that includes many different aspects of the world. Okay. Onward and upward. Science, okay, I'm borrowing this phrase and I put it in at the last minute. That's why I still had that. This is what the slide should say. This is from a brilliant colleague of mine who teaches Bhagavad Gita around the world. And this is one of his sayings that I really appreciate. He says, science studies matter. Bhagavad Gita studies what matters. So there's a difference. And actually, the two needn't be divorced. They can live happily in the same house. No sense of divorcing these. Because when we look at matter, we don't really find any solution. In fact, what we're looking for within matter is what's the heart of it all? Where does it all come from? And when we look at the Bhagavad Gita, it explains that there's matter and then there's where it all comes from, and also who we are in the scheme of the world. How do we fit in? How do we even fit into this body? How do we even get a body in the first place? And what's going to happen when we leave this body? Those are compelling questions that aren't answered by science. Science is necessary, but it has to have some sense of ultimate purpose, and that comes out in the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, we say Bhagavad Gita studies what matters. Next, here are the 5 basic truths of the Bhagavad Gita. One is jiva. So jiva in Sanskrit means the life that you are. So you're the light of your body. You're the conscious entity within the body. And you're called, when you're in the body, the jiva, the life. And then there's Ishvara. We talk about in the indigenous people of the now called United States had this sense of communion with the Great Spirit. And every culture has some conception like this. It's called Ishvara, the controller of everything. I'm happy to say I'm not the Ishvara. I have very little control over my own life, but there is a controller, according to the Bhagavad Gita, that controls everything in the universe. Then there's Prakriti. Prakriti means the material nature. And when we look out, we'll see, especially if you look at that slide of San Diego there, of the beach behind Chaitanya and Subhadra, you'll see the ocean is there, the sky is there, the way the planets are all moving. These are all Prakriti, or material nature, which is wondrous in and of itself. And then the last two are time, called Kala, and karma, which means our cosmic debt and what it means to us in our life. Of these 5 truths, the first 4 are eternal, and the last one, karma, isn't. And one of the ways that Krishna describes how to overcome our problems in the Bhagavad Gita is that we're entangled in our karma, which is, as I said before, maybe twice, a kind of debt we have in our life. And how do you overcome that and become freed from the tyranny of having to work just to survive? Well, that's a topic. So those are the 5 basic truths. And these have been enumerated unlimitedly, and that the topics go on. Even one of them you can go into and write hundreds of PhD theses on each one of these topics. But since this is an overview, that's what the basic truths of the Bhagavad Gita are. Now, if you look at the picture on the left, this is a cover of a Bhagavad Gita. This one's called Bhagavad Gita as it is, because it goes with the tradition of bhakti and presents the main purpose, the ultimate purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. And so you see on the right-hand side is Krishna, on the left is Arjuna. So Krishna is the teacher. In this context, Arjuna is going into a battle. Arjuna is his chariot driver. And the whole dialogue takes place on the chariot when Arjuna goes to the battle, and he feels, although he's a great hero and known as the best of all warriors, he then sees only doom. that no, he loses either way. If he doesn't fight, he's going to lose. And if he does fight, he's going to lose too, because there's an element there where he's fighting against many of his own people and family members. So it's a horrible situation. Have any of you ever been in a horrible situation? Let's take a survey. I want to make sure I'm not the only one. Have you ever been in horrible's pretty heavy, but have you ever been in a confusing situation? Have you ever had a dilemma in your life? You can ask this outside a baseball game. Maybe if they lost, they'll tell you, yeah, today, this was the worst day of my life. Our team lost. What?
I can't read chat. They're just flying by. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we have that in common. You know, I love the old cliche, we're all in the same boat. I think about that a lot. When I see somebody, I think like, yeah, I'm going through the same thing. They're going through the same thing as I am. I'm going the same thing as they are. No matter how well off you are now, there's a point in which all the accumulation we have in this world, whatever situation we have now, it's going to change. And sometimes drastically. In fact, and I hate to bring this up because it's a family show, we have to give up this body at some point. You know, and it's called death. Try bringing that up outside a baseball game. Or at next time you go home for the holidays, you know, when somebody says, what do you want to talk about? It's like, let's talk about death and see how it goes. So that's what Bhagavad Gita gets into. What does death mean? How did we get here in the first place? And why am I in the situation I'm in now? And so forth. So the Bhagavad Gita starts off in confusion, or I should say with Arjuna, the great warrior hero. Normally he's glorified everywhere he goes, and now he's confused and distressed. And the first chapter is sometimes translated, the title, The Yoga of Despair. And so how does he overcome the despair? That's what the Bhagavad Gita talks about. Okay, Jan, let's see if there's any more slides. And then I'm going to promise to use the balance for a few questions and reflections. So in the Bhagavad Gita, and again, these are just blindingly fast and short summaries. A self-realized person knows where to invest their life energy. This is a clear indication of being self-realized. What is your return on the attention you're giving? We want to know that, right? Next is a self-realized person knows they are not a material body. A self-realized person shows respect to all living beings. Why? Not superficially or artificially. Such a person sees the body is only a temporary vehicle. The soul is there. As far as bodies go, we're all in the same boat. We're born, we're going to die. And as far as who runs the body, who's behind it, we're all spiritual beings. And we all come from the same source. We're all related. Like if you saw your long lost brother all of a sudden and say, oh my God, good to see you. There's a sense of that in a self-realized person, and not just humans, but all life, because it sees that we're all emanations from the same divine source. And then finally, a self-realized person is not a slave to material desires. Material desires are products of a materially conditioned mind, and a self-realized person trains the mind as a friend to rise above the pettiness of this world and to not be attached to the temporary. Because why? Why would you be attached to temporary things? They're here today, gone tomorrow. JM, I think there's 2 more slides. Oh, one more. And that is, what one question do you wish the ancient wisdom literatures would answer for you? Since we're not outside a baseball game, and you already have context, what the ancient wisdom literatures are, I'll leave that as a question for you. Do you have a particular answer for that in the form of a question?
There are a few coming in. Reshma says, who am I? Second is purpose of life.
You are a spiritual soul within the material body, and your ultimate purpose is to resume your spiritual nature and not take on another material body. What are the other questions?
Rajesh asks why there is a lot of suffering in this world.
Suffering is caused by being out of sync with our ultimate purpose in life. because suffering ultimately means, if you look at the root word of it, means what you hold on to. And we grab onto the wrong things and we carry them around, and therefore we have such a burden. So those who know what's most important, they don't suffer.
Yeah, and the next one is Manu asks, what is our goal of life?
What's the goal of life? The goal of life is to revive our original consciousness. And that original consciousness is our consciousness that we're part of the complete whole, and to be actively engaged in our what is called seva, or service connection to the complete whole. And where's Waldo? That's another question from YV. And that's a good question. Where's Waldo? Because in Where's Waldo, it's hard to find him because there's so many other figures that you're looking at. And that's why we have to read Bhagavad Gita, because unless you have a clear idea what Waldo looks like in the first place, it's really hard to find him. In fact, impossible if you don't know what he looks like. So in a sense, Bhagavad Gita is asking or answering this question here to find Waldo. And you're Waldo, you're the soul. So try to find your soul, and then try to understand from there what's the source of your soul.
Next is how to be happy and peaceful.
One of the answers given in the Bhagavad Gita about being happy, that Krishna says, Shaknoti haivaya shodhum praksharira vimokshana kama krododbhamam begam sagyukta sa sukhinara. So the term in Sanskrit, sukhi nara, everyone say it, sukhi nara. Nara means a human, and sukhi means happy. So if you want to be a happy human, he gives this shaknoti haiva. So shaknoti haiva means that you have a power, a special power. And what is it? Praksharira, before you give up this present body, then kama krodho. Kama means lust and inordinate desires, and krodha means anger, because you didn't get what you wanted. Wah. So kama krodha bhavam begam, these urges, you're able to rise above them. It's pretty rare that people don't get angry when they don't get what they want, and it's pretty rare that people don't have material desires that hold them down to this world. So Krishna says, if you can overcome those through using the ideas in the Bhagavad Gita and the lifestyle that it proposes, if you're able to rise above those urges, you're a sukhi nara, a happy human. Who here wants to be a happy human? I'm going to raise my hand on this one. Hold on. Where's my cursor? I'm raising my hand. I want to be a sukhi nara. So, yeah.
Next is Kennedy. She asks, how do I know I'm on the right path?
Well, there are signposts, just like when you drive from San Francisco to Los Angeles, you can tell. Actually, we used to follow the signs more than nowadays we follow the GPS. So there's a system, it's called the Guru Parampara system. So there's literature, like the Bhagavad Gita, and then there's those who have studied the literature and are following it, and those are called gurus or teachers. Guru actually means heavy, somebody who's heavy with knowledge. So just like with any discipline, you need two things, knowledge and practice. So if you get the knowledge and you apply it by taking help from somebody who is already a teacher's assistant in the university, and they can say, here's how to follow it. If you want to get good at this, here's what to do, here's what I did, and so forth. So you have these, this is called the Guru Parampara, and then it's called system. So what are those three letters? GPS. So we have to be guided. It's a culture of guidance. You have to have a GPS system in your life. Ask one more question. I'll give you more glib answers. Go ahead.
Visam asks, what is the purpose of this universe?
That's a great question. We're going to end on this one because it's a doozy. Now, wait till you hear this. It's going to change your whole perspective. The universe is a classroom, and we enter it for sensitivity training. everything in the universe is meant to give us feedback. And when we get that feedback, the Bhagavad Gita teaches us how to absorb the feedback and take it in. So we rise to this level of sensitivity where we have empathy for others. This is what Krishna says in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Atma pamyena sarvatra samam pashyati Arjuna sukham va yadivadukam sayogi paramomata. Paramomata, he said, the highest practitioner is one who develops empathy for others, because that person, that practitioner, has taken the lessons of the universe, the goods, the bads, the ups and the downs, and has learned to balance all those out and realize why they're happening. And therefore, that person realizes, as I said before, we're all in the same boat and people are going through the same things. And therefore, the person empathizes. Empathy. M means within. Empathy means to feel. They feel for others. So this is how we can understand that we're coming to the highest level of knowledge, is when we have empathy, true empathy for others, when we see how they're suffering. Well, that runs us over the finish line. You got to run across the tape when you're doing a sprint, right? Or any race. You don't just stop at the finish line. You just run past it. And that's what we did today. And it's the beginning of our series called Inner Harmony. And I hope some of the ideas today brought you some inner harmony. Speaking of which, the yogis high in the Himalayas, they go up there just to live in caves and be very, very focused on their inner selves and try to realize the source of their self. And when they come out of their caves, they're kind of joyful. And when they see a fellow practitioner on the high mountain peaks of the Himalayas, they have this system where they raise their hands high in the air and they yell out this phrase, and it means keep the transcendental vibration going, because that's the secret to success. And the phrase is Hari Bol. I'm going to try it. If you want to try it too, you can. Let's do what the yogis do. All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.